Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to take a deeper look into Maya's modeling tools, and I'll be demonstrating how to model a simple weapon based on a design I previously drew in 2D. This is going to be a fairly lengthy demonstration because not only do I want to show you the tools that I'm using, I also want to walk you through sort of the mindset that I'm approaching some of these problems with as I'm modeling, as well as showing you some of the common errors and mistakes that happen and how to fix them. Now, the first thing I need to do before starting any new project in Maya is I need to create a new project folder. To do that, I'm going to go up to File, and then down to Project Window. Once you do that, you should get this window, and from here you will be able to create a new project folder. This project folder contains multiple subfolders, which are for housing all of your texture images, all of your renders, all of your scene files. Anything that's related to your project will be housed in this project folder. So to create a project folder, I'm going to go up to this little button, hit New, and then I'm going to give my new project folder a name. I'm going to go with axe_project, all caps. And then I can select a destination for this project folder. Make sure to pick a location that will be easily remembered. And if you're working on multiple computers, make sure to save it to some sort of external hard drive or flash drive. Then after that, all I have to do is hit accept, and it will even automatically set the project for me once I've done that the first time. Now, since I'm going to be basing my prop off of a design that I drew earlier, I need to take that drawing and put it into Maya. That means I'm going to need to take that image and I'm going to need to put it in my project folder. So here's my project folder. If I go inside, I can see I have a folder called source images, and that's where my design is going to go. So I'm going to copy that and go back to source images and paste my design right in that folder. And then I can just close that out. So now that I have my design in my source images folder, now I can create an image plane with it. Now, before I go and create my image plane, I want to make sure I am doing so through an orthographic view. And all an orthographic view is it as a camera angle, which views the scene from a straight on direction, either from the side or from the front or from the top. And it is presented with no depth, so everything in it looks really flat. This will be really useful for me as I'm modeling out the 3D version of my 2D design, because then I can compare it one-to-one with the 2D image. So to get to this orthographic view, I'm first going to start by switching to 2-panel modes, which I can do by pressing this button right here. When I did that, it brought up a second viewport, and this new one is in the front orthographic view. Now, this view is perfectly fine, but for my personal preference, I'm going to go to the side orthographic perspective. To do that, all I need to do is go up to Panels, Orthographic, and pick Side. And now you can see at the bottom of this viewport, the text has switched from front to side. And now I'm going to make my viewport bigger by sliding these bars around and clicking the tab over here on the right to minimize that menu. And then finally, to make an image plane, I'm going to go up here to the top of my orthographic viewport. I'm going to select the button here, which is labeled Image Plane. When you do that, it'll open up the Source Images folder. And from there, you'll be able to select your design and open it as an image plane. This image plane can be moved around just like any other object in Maya. So with it selected, I'm going to press W and just move it back because I want to be modeling from the center of my grid. So I think the first thing I should work on is modeling the handle. So I'm going to go ahead and create a cylinder by pressing this button up here in the poly modeling shelf. If you'd like to change the number of sides on your cylinder, you could always go to the attribute editor by clicking this tab right here, and then navigating to this tab labeled polycylinder 1. And then from there, you can change the number of sides by adjusting the value labeled subdivisions axis. You can also add vertical divisions by adjusting the subdivision's height, and even divide the top and bottom caps of the cylinder by adjusting the subdivision's caps. Check the attribute editor for settings like these anytime you make a shape. This applies to cones and cubes and any other the primitive shapes you can make in Maya. Next step, before I get any further, I'm going to make sure that my design is centered in my scene. So I'm going to just slide this over so that the center of my handle is centered right over the thickest line in my grid. Now, a quick tip on moving objects in Maya. You don't always have to have the gizmo visible when you're moving an object. Instead, what you could do is you could quickly select the handle in the direction you want to move your object, and then middle mouse click and drag, and your object will move as if you were holding that handle directly. Now with that centered, I'm going to grab my cylinder and move it down and start working on the handle. I'm going to close my outliner by clicking this button over here. And then on the right side, I'm going to open up my modeling toolkit, and that gives me a little bit more room to see. Now, this is great, except I really can't see my design from behind my cylinder. So to fix this, I'm going to go up here, and there's a button labeled X-ray up here at the top of the viewport. When I click it, I can see through my model. And then I'm going to go to vertice mode, and I'm going to start selecting vertices and adjusting the shape of my cylinder to match my design. And then from this point, I want to select the bottom faces and start extruding them down to extend my handle. So in faces mode, I'm going to select all these faces on the bottom here, but wait, it looks like I've made a mistake. When I marquee selected those faces, it also selected all the faces on the back side as well. So that's just a good thing to keep in mind when you're making big selections like that. If you want a quick way to select, say, the bottom faces of a cylinder without getting all the sides, a quick way to do it is to make this big selection and get all the walls included. And then you can go back and hold Control while dragging across your selection to unselect all the faces you didn't want to select. And then I'm going to start making extrusions and matching up each of those new divisions with my design. Don't forget, you can make extrusions by either pressing the extrude key or by holding shift and then making a transformation with your selection. Then once I've gotten to the bottom, I double check to make sure I like the shape, and I'm pretty good with that right now. Now you may notice that your mesh has some faces which appear flat and segmented, and other faces which smoothly blend into each other. We touched on this in the last video, but to go into more detail, this is because of the normals of the polygons. The normals, as mentioned before, are what determine which direction the polygon is facing, but they also determine how smooth the transition between two polygons is. So for my handle, I'm going to want to make these smooth. And to do that, I'm going to go to Edges mode and select all the edges that I want to soften. And then I'm going to hold Shift and then right-click to open a contextual menu for Edges mode. And then I'm going to go over here to Soften/Harden Edges, and I'm going to select Soften Edge. And now that I've softened my edges, I can see it looks like I may have made a mistake up here. And by pressing through it, I can confirm I did in fact make a mistake. So it looks like I accidentally extruded twice at this point, and that's left me with two overlapping edge loops. And because of the way that Smooth Preview smooths things out, I can see those edge loops separate in the Smooth Preview mode. So to fix this, I'm going to go to Edge mode, and I'm just going to double click once on one of these edge loops. And then I'm going to drag it up just to confirm there's two there. And then from there, I can delete this edge loop by holding Shift and right click to select delete edges, or I could hold Control and just press the delete key. And then from that point, I'm going to go back down to the bottom and just start making more extrusions to build out that pommel on the bottom. Now, the top of the handle here has a slightly different shape than the rest of it, so I'm going to need to create a new cylinder for it. And with this cylinder, I'm going to go to Attribute Editor, Polycylinder 2, and I'm going to change that subdivision axis down to 6. And then I'll rotate it around by 90 degrees. And then I'm just going to get to work matching the shape of the top of the handle here. To do that, I'll need to make a multi-cut. And with the multi-cut tool selected, I'm going to Control left click to make a whole edge loop, and then I'll select that edge loop and scale it up. And from there, it's just a matter of finishing up the shape. Now, in the drawing, it appears that I've actually made this with 10 sides, whereas in the model, I've ended up with just 6 sides. But in theory, I could just go back and fix this in the attribute editor, right? Well, the problem is when I try to change the number of sides, I get a bunch of errors like this. That is because you can only make this sort of change from the attribute editor if you've made no other changes after creating the cylinder. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're adding primitives to your scene, that you want to make sure you get the number of sides correctly the first time before you make any other changes. That said, I actually like the look of the 6-sided top of the handle better, so I am going to end up sticking with this. So now I've got these two objects here, I want to go ahead and combine them. But before I do that, I want to make sure that there's a proper opening on each of these objects, so that when I combine them, I can then just bridge the gap between the two of them to make a single piece. So I'm going to select these faces, and then deselect the faces I don't want, then hit delete. Then we'll go up here and press my X-ray button to look down and see if there's no more faces on the top of this part of the handle. And I'll repeat the same steps on the top half. Then once that's done, I'm going to go to object mode. I'm going to select both halves of the handle, and I'm going to hit combine. And after I've done that, I'm going to reopen the outliner, and I can see that the handle is just one object, but there's also these two groups just above it in the outliner. And these groups represent the transformation history of the two objects that used to make up this single handle. As we discussed in the previous video, history is messy and it bogs down our system, so we want to get rid of it as frequently as possible. It can also cause errors in our modeling if we don't get rid of it pretty frequently. So to delete our history, all we need to do is go up here in our poly modeling shelf and press the delete by type history button. And once you do that, you can see that those groups have disappeared. Next, I'm going to add a bevel or fencing to these corners of this top part because I want those to have a distinct sharpness. And I want to do that now so that when I bridge the gap between this part of the handle and the lower half, I'll know how many faces I'll need to bridge from the top half to the bottom half. So I'm going through and selecting all of these edges that I want to bevel while deselecting the ones I don't. Then once I'm ready, I'm going to go up to bevel. Going to increase the fraction just a little bit. I'm going to turn chamfering off so that I maintain that original edge while just adding new edges on the sides. And then hitting 3 to look at it in smooth preview, it looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go down here to the bottom, select the edge loop right here, and extrude inward. Now looking at this, there's still a lot more edges on the bottom side of this than the top, which I have to connect. So to help out with this, I'm going to use the multi-cut tool to divide some of these faces up so that I have a closer number of faces on the top of the bottom half. And as I'm making each of my cuts, I'm holding control to make sure that my vertices that I'm placing are centered on each edge. And then once I'm done, I hit enter to confirm the cut. I can also simply hold Control and Shift to do a whole loop at once. And then from there, I'm just going to divide up the rest of these. Next, I want to make sure the top of the cylindrical part of the handle lines up exactly with the bottom of the hexagonal half of the handle. To do that, I'm going to first select the vertice loop and drag it down. And then going up here, I'm going to turn on Snap to Points. And with Snap to Points turned on, anytime I move something, it'll immediately snap to the nearest vertice to my mouse. So I can use that to line up this loop of vertices right to the bottom of the hexagonal shape. So now I know that these are perfectly aligned. So as I'm going, I'm finding that the number of faces on the top and bottom half of this are just not lining up very well. So sometimes you just need to call it quits on a piece of geometry and start fresh. So I'm gonna go to face mode, double click, and delete all these faces. It might have been a bit of work to make it the first time, but it won't take very long to recreate it. And this time when I make this new cylinder, I'm gonna make sure that it has a number of faces that are divisible by 6. So it will line up with my hexagonal shape. So I'm going to make sure that this one is 24 sides. Oh, and don't forget to turn off Snap to Points once you're done with it. And so here I quickly remake the handle so we can get back to where we were before. Now that I've made my new handle, I'm going to shrink this edge a little bit and then extrude it out, getting it pretty close to the hexagon shape's edges, but not quite there. Then once I'm ready, I can start bridging the two. So I'm going to go to edge mode and just start finding the best spots to bridge this. And now with both parts bridged, I'm just going to go in and add an edge on the bottom here and right here to maintain that sharp edge. And now to move on to the top half of the axe. So I'm going to create another cylinder, making sure it has 24 sides again, like the bottom cylinder. Going to faces, deleting those faces on the bottom. And then here on the top side of the hexagonal shape, I'm going to go ahead and delete these top faces as well. And then like before, I can get to work reshaping this cylinder to match my design. Another way I can start adding edge loops is with something called the Insert Edge Loop tool. You can find Insert Edge Loops up here in the Mesh Tools menu. And as discussed in the previous video, if you want to add a button to your shelf, you just hold Control and Shift and then select it from the menu to add it to your shelf. And then just like that, I have a new icon for Insert Edge Loops at the end of my shelf. However, I already have this tool on my shelf just because I use it a lot, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this icon and refer to the one I already have on the shelf. Now, to work with this tool, I'm going to want to work with the tool settings. And to do that, I'm going to need to open up the tool settings window. To access that, I'm going to go up to Window, General Editors, Tool Settings. And because I like to use this window a lot, I'm going to go ahead and dock it right over here underneath my modeling toolkit. And now with my Insert Edge Loop tool selected and my Maintain Positions mode changed to multiple edge loops, I can then set a number of edge loops to insert at once when I click my model. And when I do that, all of my edge loops will be evenly spaced apart. Now, I could go about and individually scale each of these edge loops down by themselves, but I could get a quicker result if I use something called soft selection. Now, to use soft selection, all you need to do is press the B key. And what soft selection does is everything that is highlighted in a warm color from yellow to red will be affected as I scale the actual selection that I've made. And the closer an object is to my selection, the more it'll be affected. And to change the scale of the effect, all you need to do is hold B and then click and drag to scale the effect radius. And then you can see down here, all of these edges are blue. That means they will not be affected at all by the soft selection. So then I'm just going to select this square here to scale on the X and Z axes and just scale inwards. It won't get a perfect result, but it will get me pretty close pretty quickly to use soft select. And then once I'm done using soft selection, I can just tap the B key again to turn it off. And I'll just quickly go through and fix these last edge loops. And as I just work my way up the axe, it's the same process of just extruding and adding more edge loops to fill out that shape. Then once I reach the very tip, I'm going to want to close this gap. To accomplish this, I'm going to hold Shift, right click, and then I'm going to hover over Merge/Collapse Edges, and then I'm going to go to Merge Edges to Center. Then, just as we've done before, I'm going to select all of my edge loops that I want to be sharp, and I'm going to use the bevel tool on them to give them fencing so that they will be sharp in the smooth preview mode. Next up, I'm going to start working on my blade. So I'm just going to start by creating a cube and dragging it up. And then I'm just going to select the vertices and sort of stretch them out to meet the bounds of the blade. And I'm going to want to get these vertices right up flush against the hilt. To do this, I would like to see the vertices on my hilt while I don't have it selected. So to do this, I'm going to turn on wireframe on shaded by pressing this button up here. And then like before, I can use snap to points, and I can move these vertices to match up right with that vertice here. And I'll move this vertice down as well, but I'm just eyeballing it on the bottom for now. Now, since both sides of this are going to be identical, there's no need to work on both of them separately. So I'm going to delete one half of it for the time being, and then mirror the other side over later on. And delete this face too. Then I'll go ahead and move these vertices over here. Next, I want to try to add more cuts to my blade side so that they match up to the geometry that I have on the hilt side. So I'm turning on the wireframe on my left viewport. And then with the multi-cut tool, I'm just going to try to add cuts that line up with the edge loops I have on my hilt. It doesn't mean it's perfect, I can fix it later. And then from that point, I'm just going to move around vertices and start making extrusions to fill in the shape of this blade. Now here I considered adding full edge loops in like this by just holding control, but then I realized that if I did that multiple times that my edges would really cluster at the bottom here, and that's not the effect I wanted. So instead I opted to just place my vertices one by one so to have a little more control over it. Now I've run into a bit of a problem here. There isn't an edge where I want to place this vertice. So when I place a vertice here, it's going to create an n-gon. I'm going to go ahead and be fine with that for the time being, but I want to address that later. Same thing up here. There's a middle point vertice there. And then right here as well. And then I'll stop here and hit enter. So now how do we solve this n-gon problem down here at the bottom? Well, the approach I'm going to take is to keep adding cuts to make more quads until we no longer have an n-gon. So I made a cut there, and I'm going to go to this other side and cut here as well. Add a missing edge here. And then I'm going to make cuts from here all the way down into this corner. And then if I want to slide this edge down without changing the overall shape of the geometry, I can go up here to Mesh Tools and select Slide Edge. And then with the middle mouse button, I can just drag that edge down. Another way to slide edges and vertices without changing the shape of the overall mesh is to hold Control and Shift together and then simply slide it down with the Move tool. I also left a couple of n-gons up here as well, so I'm going to use the multi-cut tool to add edges until they are quads again. This process of adjusting vertices and adding edges to eliminate quads continues until I roughly map out the shape of this inset on the blade with my geometry. Now this spot is a little bit tricky because I got an n-gon to solve here, but I don't want to add any more geometry over here because it's the same number of faces on both sides. So instead I'm going to get a little bit creative with how I divide this up. So I'm going to make a cut right here to make a triangle. And then I've created an n-gon over here, but what I can do is if I add a vertice right here in the middle of the triangle and cut across here to this corner of the n-gon, now I'm left with only quads, because each of these polygons I just worked with now has 4 sides. This sort of thing can be a bit tedious at times, but that's just sort of the problem solving that comes with modeling. And you'll get better and better as you practice, so it won't be quite as tedious the more you do it. The same goes for when you are just moving vertices around to smoothen out your geometry. It takes a while, but it's worth it in the end. Jumping ahead a bit, I'm going to start using the target weld tool to snap these vertices towards the center of the blade so we can get that nice tapered effect, as if the blade was really sharp. And then when I get to this bottom corner, I have to just take a little bit of special care to make sure that I'm maintaining quads and that the blade tapers in a way that feels natural. And then with all of these edges selected right here, where it would be a sharp corner, I'm going to go ahead and harden those edges. Another way to smooth out a whole bunch of vertices at once is to hold Shift, right click, and then select Average Vertices. And you can press G a bunch of times to repeat that operation to really smooth those vertices out. I'm pretty happy with the shape of this now, so I'm going to extrude inward the inset. So I'm going to grab all these faces that I want to push in, and then I'm going to hold Shift and then move it inwards to extrude it. And now it's time for fencing. So for some of these areas, I'm going to do the same method where I hit the bevel button and use that to get really even edges. But in some spots like this, I'm going to use the multi-cut tool to get my fencing instead, because I need a little bit more control over where these edges go. Pay special attention to what's happening when you use the bevel tool, because sometimes faces that were once quads will become n-gons because of the new edges that you've added. So usually at some point you'll need to go back and fix those n-gons by using the multi-cut tool to make quads again. So I'm pretty happy where this is at right now, but I want to double check my model to make sure that there are no n-gons anywhere that I missed. Thankfully, there is a way to systematically check our whole model to see if there are any n-gons. So I'm going to make one right now just to see what that looks like, and then we're going to go look for n-gons. So to look for n-gons or triangles or anything like that in your geometry, you can go ahead and go to Select, and then Use Constraints. And what Use Constraints is it's a tool to constrain what you can select at any given time. So while we're in face mode, we can select triangles, quads, or n-sides, which is n-gons. And so I'm going to start with quads. I'm going to hit All in next, which allows me to select everything that is a quad. And anything that is an n-gon or a triangle is not selected. So we can see down here too, I've got some n-gons that I didn't see before. In fact, if I look really closely, I'll find that actually the reason why there's n-gons here is because I've got 3 vertices here that I thought were merged that were actually not merged. They're just very close together. So with them all selected, I'm going to hold Shift and right click and then go to Merge Vertices and then Merge to Center. And then that's fixed. You can, of course, search for triangles as well. And while I don't see any triangles being highlighted, there might be some hidden. So I'm going to press the F key while I have All and Next selected in Selection Constraints. And when that happened, it did zoom in on a triangle that I apparently have. It doesn't look like a triangle. It looks like I just have an edge. But if I go to vertice mode and start moving some of these vertices, I'll find that, oh, there's my triangles. They were hidden because, again, the vertices were overlapping and I couldn't see that there was actually 2 vertices there instead of 1. And then here I found one more n-gon, and this one is particularly oddly shaped. So I'm going to have to come in with the multi-cut tool and try to best guess what this shape should look like. And then once I have made all my cuts, I'm going to grab that middle vertice and then go to Snap to Points and drag it out so that it's aligned with the other points, like this. If you're done with using selection constraints, be sure to click Constrain Nothing before closing the window. Otherwise, your selection constraints will still be on and you will likely forget, and then you'll be wondering later why you can't select certain things. Now I think I'm just about done with this side of the blade. I'm just going to make this a little bit thinner. And then once I'm satisfied, I'm going to mirror it with the mirror tool. And thankfully this is mirrored on the right axis, but you could always also mirror it on the y-axis. You can see it goes in there. Or you can mirror on the z-axis and it goes that way. Now, unfortunately, when I mirrored it, my merge threshold was too high, and so it actually merged the vertices for the open part that I wanted to merge with the handle. So I'm going to undo my mirror, and then I'm going to do it again. But this time I'm going to pay special attention to the merge threshold. So when the merge threshold is high like this, it will merge vertices that are very far apart from each other. So I want to lower my merge threshold to a point where the vertices at the opening here don't merge together, but I still have a closed seam around the blade. So this merge threshold of 0.0366 is probably pretty good. It looks like everything is working well there. Now that everything is mirrored, I'm realizing I forgot to put fencing up along the edge of this blade. So it's not going to be very sharp when I go into smooth preview. So I'm going to need to use the multi-cut tool to add the fencing to the edge of this blade. But before I do that, I'm going to turn on symmetry by going to this drop-down menu and selecting Object X. So now any changes you make to your mesh will be mirrored on that axis that you selected. So anytime I see a blue component like a face or an edge, that means that the symmetry is being recognized by Maya and it will be mirrored to the other side. So now with symmetry on, I'm going to start making my cuts. And there we go. There is the axe head, smooth and all. And if I like to add a little more detail, I can add a little notch here in the blade. It might not have been in the original design, but I think I'd like to add the extra detail. Once I've made a nice section of faces, I can just delete them. And then I can worry about adjusting the shape of this and filling in the empty space. Once I'm ready to fill this in, I'm going to turn off my symmetry, and then I'm going to extrude inward and move it back. And then using the bridge tool, I'm going to continue to fill in these gaps here. Then once I fill that area in, I need to just add the fencing to the outside so that it doesn't collapse in on itself. Then I noticed that this created some n-gons, so I'm going to have to resolve those. And all I need to do is just grab this corner and bring it into the center of my polygons here. And then finally, after a ton of fidgeting with vertices back and forth, we end up with a pretty good notch at the end. I'm going to leave the other side of the axe for another time, since it's pretty much just more of the same of what I just showed you. Next, I'm going to move on to connecting the blade to the handle. So with both selected, I'm going to hit Combine. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete the faces on the inside here between the blade and the handle. Next up, I'm going to add an extra loop right here to match up with the fencing on my blade. Next, with snapping on, I'm just going to raise these vertices up to meet the bottom of the blade here. And then next up, I'm just going to start moving vertices over to meet the other vertices on the handle. Sometimes for certain spots, it's actually easier to work from within the mesh, looking on the inside. Also, don't forget to turn on X-ray mode. That can be really helpful too when you can't see certain vertices. I'm not welding them yet. I'm just moving them to place so that I can weld them all at once in all the precise positions that I want them to be in. And then I noticed up here that this vertice doesn't have a corresponding vertice to merge to on the handle, so I'm going to have to make it. I'm just going to cut over here to the middle. And then I'm going to delete this edge to make that a quad. And then for this one, I'll just target weld. And then down here is another example of a missing corresponding vertice on the handle, so I'm going to have to make up some geometry for that here as well. And then for each of these vertices that I didn't merge immediately, I'm going to go through, select them both, and then hold Shift right click and go to merge vertices to center. And then after the first merge, I can just hit G to keep merging vertices. For the rest of this, it's pretty much just cleanup, so we're going to speed right through and get to the end. Great, and those are pretty much all the tools you'll need to model yourself a bladed weapon in Maya. There's a few details that I left out for the time being, but that's okay. I'm going to go back and finish those later. For the sake of the video, this is where I'm going to wrap things up for now. So with that, good luck, and I hope you have a good one.